This is a Boeing 777-300ER. It's painted in American Airlines livery, and it flies the Dallas to London Heathrow route almost every single day. Nothing spectacular about that, right? But here's what makes it interesting. That aircraft represents American Airlines' deliberate decision to never, ever order the Airbus A380, a decision that saved them over $4 billion. And the way they pulled it off? A slot deal at this exact airport that's now worth more than $2 billion. Let me show you what I mean. When Airbus launched the A380 in the early 2000s, it was supposed to revolutionize air travel. 500+ seats, double-deck luxury, the biggest passenger aircraft ever built. Emirates initially ordered 162 of them. Singapore Airlines grabbed 24. British Airways took 12. How could America's largest airline ignore the future of aviation? It turns out Americans' executives understood something their competitors didn't. They knew their Dallas, Chicago, and Miami hubs would never consistently fill 500 seats the way Emirates' Dubai Fortress hub could. So, while their competitors struggled for decades with unnecessary capacity, American quietly built something better. A network strategy that didn't need the superjumbo at all. To understand why American walked away from the A380, you need to understand how the aircraft was supposed to work. The A380s Economics only made sense under very specific conditions. You needed a mega hub that concentrated passengers from dozens of feeder routes into single massive departures. You needed consistently high load factors, or the fuel burn per seat would spike dramatically. And you needed routes where demand was so concentrated that frequency didn't matter as much as capacity. Dubai fits that model perfectly. Emirates funnels passengers from Africa, Europe, Asia, and Australia through a single geographic choke point. Its hub design practically demanded enormous aircraft. American Airlines operates nothing like that. Here's how Vasu Raja, then American's Vice President of Planning, put it in 2019. We operate out of 9 different hubs in the US, and there's no single hub where you can pull 500 people's worth of demand every single day. Dallas-Fort Worth, Chicago O'Hare, Miami, Philadelphia, Charlotte, Phoenix, Los Angeles, New York JFK, Washington National. Today, American actually operates 10 hubs, including New York LaGuardia, spreading demand even more widely across the country. Think about what that means operationally. Instead of funneling everyone through one fortress, American's network disperses passengers across multiple connection points. No single route generates enough consistent demand to justify 500 seats day after day. And here's the thing most people miss. The A380 wasn't just expensive to buy, it was catastrophically expensive to operate when the math didn't work. Load factors below a certain percent meant fuel burn per seat climbed steeply. The aircraft required dual-level boarding gates that most American airports didn't have, specialized ground equipment, custom hangars, unique pilot training programs. Every A380 order represented not just an airline purchase, but a complete infrastructure investment that Americans' hub structure couldn't justify. While Airbus was betting big on the superjumbo concept, Boeing was moving in a completely different direction. The 777 and later the 787 represented a philosophy that matched Americans' network perfectly. Fuel-efficient twin-engine aircraft, lower operating costs per seat, flexibility to deploy across many routes profitably, rather than concentrating capacity on just a few. American was already trending this direction before the A380 even launched. It retired its last passenger 747s, 2 747 SPs by 1994. 4 engines were already falling out of favor in its fleet planning. By the time the A380 entered service in 2007, something else had changed too. Jet fuel prices were rising dramatically. The 2008 financial crisis was approaching. Airlines everywhere were suddenly very interested in fuel efficiency. The A380 arrived at exactly the wrong moment. Americans' fleet planners looked at the numbers and saw a clear path. Boeing 777s for high-demand long-haul routes, Boeing 787s for thinner routes that couldn't support high-capacity aircraft, a mixed fleet that could flex across their entire network without requiring massive infrastructure changes. No dual-level gates needed, no custom hangars, no orphan pilot training programs that couldn't scale. Now, here's where the story gets really interesting. London Heathrow is the most slot-constrained airport in the world. Now, only 480,000 aircraft movements per year, demand that exceeds capacity by a factor that makes landing rights extraordinarily valuable. For decades, Americans' transatlantic strategy was shaped by one simple problem. It wanted more Heathrow presence than their slot portfolio allowed. The obvious solution? Fly bigger aircraft, more passengers per slot, maximize what you've got. That is exactly the logic that led other airlines to order the A380. British Airways used them on its Heathrow routes, specifically because it couldn't increase frequencies. American had a different idea. In 2008, the US-EU Open Skies Agreement changed the competitive landscape at Heathrow. The new agreement opened the floodgates, allowing any US and EU carrier to compete for Heathrow routes. American didn't just consolidate its existing Gatwick flights to Heathrow, it executed a slot acquisition strategy that would prove to be worth billions. That same year, other carriers were scrambling for Heathrow access. Continental Airlines paid $209 million for just 4 daily slot pairs. That's $52 million per slot pair in 2008. American saw the opportunity and began building its position. In 2015, it purchased a slot pair from SAS for $60 million. In 2017, it bought 2 more from SAS for $75 million. Each acquisition strengthened its Heathrow presence without requiring them to fill 500-seat aircraft. The genius here is subtle but profound. Instead of buying enormous aircraft to maximize passenger count per slot, American invested in acquiring more slots and flying optimally sized aircraft on each one. Same total capacity, way more flexibility, and assets that appreciate in value rather than depreciate. There's another dimension to this story that most coverage misses. American's decision to skip the A380 wasn't just about aircraft economics, it was about network philosophy. US airlines prioritize frequency over capacity. They want more flights, not bigger flights. They want the flexibility to adjust schedules, add routes, and respond to shifts in demand without being locked into massive aircraft commitments. The A380 represented the opposite approach. Fewer flights, bigger aircraft, concentrated schedules. For an airline like Emirates with a single mega hub, that works beautifully. For American, with 10 hubs, it's operationally impossible. Consider what happens when demand drops unexpectedly on a route. If you're flying a 777-300ER with 304 seats, you can downgrade to a 7879 with around 244 or 285 seats relatively easily. If you're flying an A380 with 500 seats, your options are limited. You can't exactly switch to something smaller without completely different infrastructure. You're stuck with an aircraft designed for peak demand during periods of trough demand. American's fleet strategy built in flexibility, the ability to right-size aircraft to routes, the option to increase frequency during high-demand periods and consolidate during slow ones. The A380 offered none of that flexibility. It was an all-or-nothing bet on consistent mega demand that American's network couldn't guarantee. There's a pattern here that applies far beyond airlines. When Airbus launched the A380 program, they bet on a specific vision of the future: increasingly congested airports, growing hub concentration, demand that would outstrip runway capacity. Boeing bet on a different vision: point-to-point travel, fuel efficiency, network flexibility. Boeing was right, not because it predicted the future perfectly, but because it built products that could adapt to multiple futures. American Airlines understood the same principle. It didn't just evaluate whether the A380 was a good aircraft, it evaluated whether it fit its network, its hubs, its competitive position, and its long-term flexibility. The answer was no across every dimension. American didn't just skip the superjumbo, it invested the capital they saved into appreciating assets with a better strategic fit: Heathrow slots. Boeing twin-engine aircraft, network flexibility. That's not risk avoidance, that's capital allocation genius. It's worth noting that American wasn't alone in passing on the A380, but it was uniquely decisive about it. American cut through that analysis quickly. Its hub structure made the answer obvious to anyone willing to see it clearly. Airbus delivered 251 A380s, with production running from 2003 to 2021. US carriers accounted for exactly 0 of those orders. Not one American airline ever operated the superjumbo. Not United, not Delta, not American. The aircraft that was supposed to define the future of aviation never found a home in America's largest aviation market. American's alternative investment strategy is visible in its current fleet. It operates one of the largest 777 fleets of any airline. It has 787 Dreamliners for efficiency on medium-demand routes. It's invested in airport infrastructure at its hubs, rather than building specialized facilities for aircraft it would never efficiently utilize. Today, American operates multiple daily frequencies from its major hubs into London Heathrow using right-sized aircraft. It can flex capacity seasonally. It can adjust schedules competitively. It's not locked into mega departures that require perfect load factors to make sense. When Airbus announced the end of A380 production in 2019, with the final aircraft delivered in December 2021, the superjumbo era was formally over. No new orders would ever be filled. Airlines that bet heavily on the aircraft faced decades of depreciation and operational challenges ahead. Airlines that had walked away, like American, had already moved on to more flexible fleet strategies. So, what's the real lesson here? American Airlines won by understanding what it was actually optimizing for. Not prestige, not headline capacity, not keeping up with competitors who were making flashy orders. It optimized for network fit, capital efficiency, long-term flexibility. The A380 was an engineering marvel. It was genuinely innovative technology, but innovation doesn't automatically mean strategic fit. American's executives looked at its 10-hub network, its dispersed demand patterns, its capital allocation priorities, and its competitive position at slot-constrained airports like Heathrow. The answer was clear: build slot portfolios, not superjumbo fleets. Hey, before you go, the YouTube algorithm thinks you're going to like this video next, so why not check it out?